Good morning. When I was in high school, I was captivated by a book, and I'm really going to date myself with this when I talk about this, but I was captivated by a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And I used to walk around with it in my back pocket, and that was my first experience with binging. I would take it out and read it and stuff, and I'd read it a few times until I realized that the author, Richard Bach, had in his dedication, the front of the book said, to the Jonathan Livingston Seagull and all of us. And I was captivated by the magic of the book because basically it's a theme that we find throughout spiritual ideas and writings of there is something very special within each and every one of us, whether we have been taught it or not. I would like to think that many, many years later, when another series of books came out, Harry Potter and his adventures, and then later the movies, when I first got exposed to Harry Potter, I thought of the same thing. The perfect dedication would be to the Harry Potter in all of us. I love the story of Harry Potter. I'm a huge fan, especially the first couple of books when they're when they're young kids, and I think I think of connecting with the young kid aspect because in the work of Don Miguel Ruiz, he talks about the idea that when we first come into this world, we are pretty darn close to perfect in terms of our curiosity, in terms of our wonder, in terms of being able to see the world around us with fresh and clear eyes. Our ability to allow our minds to just go and our imaginations. You know, we all think about how at Christmas time, when you have a new child in the house, that for the first couple of Christmases, they are just enamored with the boxes. And they don't think much of the gifts because the boxes represent potentiality. The boxes represent a place that they can play and turn into anything they want. And I can relate to Harry Potter as an archetype, and so whatever applies to you, whether it's Harry Potter or Harriet Potter, in terms of where you're at with things, this idea that sometimes we are in the world, but we really feel very strongly that we are not of the world. In the New Testament, there's a bunch of guys hanging out one day who look at Jesus and say, we know you, you can't tell us anything. We know about your mother and we know about your supposed father. And he says, you don't know me. Don't pretend that you know me, because I may be in this world, but I'm not of this world. There's something very special about me. There's a spark within me. And what I love about the Harry Potter idea is that basically it's the same theme. Here's a kid who has a spark in him that we all have. And I love the way the author gives him a scar in his forehead of the lightning bolt, and there's that little piece that indicates that he is very special. And his specialness, his magic, his power come up from time to time early in the story, and it scares him. There's this one story where he's at the zoo, and all of a sudden, this snake begins to communicate with him, and he understands things about animals, and he's able to remove the glass between himself and the place where the snake lives, and he just freaks himself out. It's like, oh my God, I've got this power, and it shows up and fits and starts. It's kind of like it's got a short circuit in it, but it's there, So he's kind of aware of it. And so we go along and we're kind of aware of our own power. We're kind of aware of the fact that there's something special about us. I spent a lot of years working with people, and early in my career of working with people, I spent a number of years in juvenile corrections and parole for young people in those programs. And I would meet people from horrendously rough, dark backgrounds. People who have been challenged in schools and institutions and families, and neighborhoods and cities, wherever they live. Way behind in education, way behind in everything. A lot of people not really pulling for them. And I would sit down and I would talk with them as part of my job, and I would think, what in the world does this person have in terms of a frame of reference? And yet within all that darkness, within all that, they would say to me, they'd say, someday I'd like to be a veterinarian. Someday I'd like to be a musician. I'd like to help my mom buy a house. I'd like to own a business. And I would look at them and say, oh my God, how in the world, where does this come from? But what we know in this teaching, it's what Ernest Holmes refers to in our teaching as the divine urge. There's something very special in us. There's the spark. And Harry Potter knows this. He knows the spark is there. And then what happens along the line is that something captures our attention. And in the stories and in the books, what happens is that the owls begin to show up and begin to drop the letters, the invitations. Come be part of something. Come be larger. That's what I like about it. I love that about our philosophy. This is a center where we see, hey, come. Find your potential. Find your life. Find your journey. Find that very special spark that's within you. Find your magic. That's what our teaching is. People don't come in this room to find something they don't already have. What we're here to do in this room is to talk about how we use it and to remind us that we have it within us. Because unfortunately, in this world, with the heavier, denser energies of this world, we can kind of begin to forget who and what we are. And sometimes we attract into our lives people who sort of want to squash that a little bit. So he begins to get the letters from the owls. And what's interesting about the owl, metaphysically, is that what the owl represents metaphysically is the owl is a transformational figure. It represents death and it represents life all at the same time. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the owl represents we have to let go of something in order to grab something else. We have to leave one journey in order to start another journey. And so he gets the letter of call. You know, as a minister, we were supposed to get what's called the letter of call, which is to go into our ministry. You see, I believe that we're all ministers, and I believe that we all get our ministers of call. We get our call into life. We get our call into a journey. We get our call. Our call comes from our soul and says, this is what we should be doing. This is where we should be going. And so the owl delivers. The owl comes from the soul and makes this delivery. And Harry wants to ignore it at first because he's got this family. He's got his hands full with this really crazy, dysfunctional, unhealthy family. And he's got his hands full with that. He's trying to be a kid. He's trying to navigate. He's got this cousin or stepbrother, whoever it is like the cousin from hell, right? He's trying to deal with that. Now, I don't have time for a calling. I don't have a time to go out there and engage in a new journey. But the owl comes and comes and comes, and pretty soon the owl floods the house with these letters to the point to where everyone's like, fine, go, please go. You're driving us crazy with this call. You ever live with someone who's got an intense call? They can drive you crazy, right? And we say, please go, really. Send us a postcard, okay? Tell me how that works out. So Harry Potter listens to the call. And what we know in this teaching is that the call comes from within. But because we live in this three-dimensional world with the heavy and dense energies, and I'm not saying heavy and dense in a negative way, that's the world we live in. It's a very beautiful world. And so the call kind of moves out from our soul and gets reflected back to us from the people we surround ourselves with, the sages and mystics who we read, what we attract to us in terms of teachings and understandings and ideas. And so Harry Potter goes. I love the fact that the children in the Harry Potter stories, they go to a train station. Think about a train station to take that beautiful, mystical, magical journey through a beautiful countryside. But they have to get on the train. And that sometimes is the hardest part. Okay, I'll honor the call. I'll go to the call. I'll do it. And then all of a sudden it's like, but oh my God, I don't know. I don't know if I can let go of this. And I know that many of you are students of Buddhism, and that's where the ideas of attachment and non-attachment come in. To be able to let go of one thing to grab a hold of another. To be able to leave our sedentary lives that we have become comfortable in. And a train is about movement. A train is about journey. And that's what's movement and journey. Going forward is a movement it's a movement opportunity. And so they go to the station. And I love this about the story, is that the author came up with the idea that they are to go to King's Cross Station in London, maybe one of the most famous train stations in all the world. And they go to platform 9 3/4. I love that. Okay, we got 9 and we got 10. These little kids, wide-eyed kids, like, oh my God, 9 and 10. What do I do? And so Ernest Holmes talks about, he defines the mystic as the one who knows the thought of God, whoever they may be. So we see the archetype of the mystic there. Go to the brick wall. What are you talking about, the brick wall? Just grab a hold of your cart with all your belongings and go into the brick wall. Have you lost your mind? You see, in metaphysics and New Thought, this is where our definition of faith comes in. Now, religion and spiritual teachings are filled with the idea of faith. In fact, some people refer to their religion as my faith. And there's all kinds of ideas, and most of you have been exposed to enough religion. You know where those are. If you want a definition of what religious science says about faith, it's called the brick wall in Harry Potter. That's the definition. It's in the back of the Science of Mind textbook. You have to look really hard for it. What they used to say, play Zeppelin backwards and you'd get a message. Okay. So if Ernest Holmes were on an album, you could play it. Oh, album. I'm letting you know how old I am today. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Led Zeppelin, albums. Wow. So, yeah, you can see I've really progressed, haven't I? So faith, and the mystics are always Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, the great mystics. They're always the ones who talk about stepping in faith. I have always been so touched by every year when it's Martin Luther King's birthday, and somebody will play this on TV, or you'll get it on YouTube or whatever, that speech where Martin Luther King, and this is just days before he leaves this world, he talks about the city on the mountaintop. And he's being surrounded by people who have been jailed, couldn't vote, sitting in the back of buses, had bricks thrown at them. He said, there is a city. There's a city. And there's a part in this speech. He's got notes and stuff. You see him disengage. He's off his notes now. He's off the grid. And he says, I may not be with you, but I will meet you there. That's a statement in faith. That's where we are called upon to go, to that place where we cannot see beyond. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, talks about aligning ourselves with being able to see through and beyond what appears to be. In religious science, we use the word appearance a lot. That's the the words of King, Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, to look beyond the appearance of. I wonder if King, in his vision, saw a black president of the United States. Is that what he meant that day when he saw through the brick wall? And so, for me, the idea of God, Spirit, whatever you want to call it, and I want to talk about that for just a minute. what we call God. Emma Curtis Hopkins, one of our ancestors, a beloved ancestors, in her book, Practical Mysticism, and I can't remember the number today, but somewhere in the book she says there are over 100 different names for God. And then she encourages us, find your own name for God. I love that. I love that idea. To find the idea that somehow shows up proportional to what it is that we're facing. And lately, the last several months, I have come to love the name for God that I would call infinite potentiality. See, that's what's through the brick wall. That's what King was talking about when he talked about the city on the hill, of where we're going. Infinite potentiality. I went to a one-day little conference thing in Oakland some years ago. A lot of ministers and practitioners from Northern California went there. We're kind of talking about our movement. Where is our movement going? And they had some CSL brass there. And one of them was Dr. Ken Gordon, who is our spiritual leader and president or whatever. And he was talking about the idea of where our movement is, where our teaching fits in our culture, society, in the world. Who and what are we? Where do we fit? And he threw out a term, he said, and I kind of alluded to it, it's, we are in the field of infinite potentiality, you know? And religious science is full of all kinds of stuff like that, you know? The field of infinite potentiality. It's like, oh God, that sounds so great. I want that monogrammed on something. I want that to be a title of the book I'm going to write. I want a bumper sticker for that. That sounds so great. But then maybe I'm kind of slower than most people, but I think, you know, what does that really mean? What does that look like, you know? And someone at the conference must have been reading my mind, because someone stood up and began to kind of flesh that out. And he was talking about the idea of the immigrants who came to this country in the 19th and 20th century. And we see those grainy old black and white films and photos of them, you know, and they've got these little tiny suitcases, and they're coming from somewhere in Europe, and they got their suit of clothes, and they got this little suitcase. It's like they're holding this, you know what I'm saying? And it's no bigger than this. And it's kind of beat up, and they're sitting on some deck of a ship that's been washing around the Atlantic Ocean, and they come into where the Statue of Liberty is, and they go down the plank, and they begin to make their way into America. And they have left a place where there have been generations of ancestors and ancestors in the cemeteries, and there's culture and language and family and family and family and religion and all of that. And one day they get into a boat and they go off to this place, and their physical life is back there. They have very few of the trappings of their physical life. They come into this place, this brick wall for them, and they head out in there. And eventually they find their way somewhere, and they start a business, or they farm, or they ranch, or they work for a factory, or they become an artist, or they get into politics, or they build a town, or whatever they do. And then one day they have their wife, and they have their children, or they have their husband, and they have their children, and they have their grandchildren. They have their house, and they have their orchards, they have whatever they have. And basically what this person was saying, to be on the field of infinite potentiality is to be ahead of our physical expression, to be ahead of that. So, we open up to God, infinite potentiality. I'm standing before the brick wall. My soul has called me to go through. And what is that? And the first thing we have to do is we have to step forward. Because maybe we don't even know what that is. That's kind of where I am. I'm kind of like an immigrant right now. I'm like a refugee, you know? I'm living in a trailer down in Las Molinas, you know what I'm saying? Out there with a bunch of other paradise refugees, you know? We're out there draining our gray water tanks and stuff. You know what that is, right? I can tell the trailer people here. I never heard of a gray water tank, you know what I'm saying? Now, I'm one with it. I can drive up to my trailer and just know it needs to be emptied. You know what I'm saying? I am like the trailer whisperer. Refugees, man. I don't know where I'm going. You know? It's funny. I think it's interesting. I'm living in a little house with wheels. It may not be going, wheels. Think about all this metaphor, man. Where am I going, you know? But it wasn't long ago. I was standing in a parking lot in Chico. And I don't know how many of you know about the big, huge Safeway strip mall complex down there across from the cemetery in the middle of Chico. And I was down there 2 days after everything that I had, left. Everything I own is now in the spirit world. And I have my little Toyota Yaris, and I have my backpack, and I had my clothes. And me and Walmart, we started putting my life back together. This outfit is entirely Walmart. Okay? Except for the shoes. I got those on sale at some shoe store in Chico that was going out of business. But anyway. So I was standing in this parking lot, and I'm looking towards the ridge. That's what we call Paradise, the ridge down there, that area. And it was like nuclear winter in Chico that day. It was in the middle of the day, but it was dark. It was cold. The air was just brown. Look up on the ridge. See this wall of brown, gray, black smoke just going straight up. All the ghosts of all the belongings in that. All the spirits being raised up in that smoke. And I stood there, and I wanted to pray. I wanted to pray. And so I wanted to find a word for God that was meaningful to me. And in that moment, what came up for me was infinite potentiality. Oh, infinite potentiality. I am so grateful that you are with me. I am so grateful that you are all there is. You are with me and I am with you. And I don't know where we're going, but I am searching for the faith to connect with your wisdom. And of all the names I've used for God, I felt the most loved that day. We got some flowery words for God, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not someone who's drawn much to the scientific terms, but infinite potentiality seems very scientific to me, but it felt so loving at that moment. And I thought of the story in the New Testament, one of my favorite stories, where someone was talking about there was a time back then when the Bible was put together where some people felt that God only really cared about you if you were a certain status. There was very much a caste system, and Jesus was hanging out with day laborers, basically, carpenters, fishermen. They were day laborers. These were labor people, man. He was hanging out with them, right? And so, do you think God cares about us, man? We're like the bottom, you know. And he says, see the marketplace over there? And in that cage, they got a bunch of sparrows over there. God knows of each sparrow. God knows of you. God is with, metaphysically, we would say, God is with every sparrow. God is with us. God loves us. We are loved. And in that day, in that parking lot, I felt loved in the midst of all of this very strange event that I could not have planned. I felt loved by this universe, by God. And I knew there was a direction for me, even if I haven't found it. Alan Cohen has written a book on the Tao that I'm reading called The Tao Made Easy. And he talks about, in the movie, we have all heard, may the force be with you. And Alan Cohen says, more accurately, it should be, may you be with the force. because Holmes talks about aligning. Ernest Holmes says, there is no limit to the law, which is another good word for God, as one's understanding unfolds to our possibilities of in doing so, our attainment will increase. By coming into this room, you are not getting a God. You have God. Our job is to open up to it, to allow it to take us on our journey. I want to close this morning with a piece by a woman by the name of Colette Baron Reed. And she's a spiritual writer. She says, joy and the beautiful lightness of being alive and creative in our personal world is the focus of spiritual awareness. Transformation is inevitable as we grow into our most beautiful, empowered self. Indeed, we will go through some uncomfortable stages as we let go of the forms of our life that no longer fit our evolving selves. Every aspect of our experience must go through shifts in order to match that emerging expression. But as we focus on the beautiful and not on the challenge, and choose the expanse of love, we will soon know the miracle of our soul and its glorious journey. So, can we do a prayer? Okay. I'd like you to join me in prayer, if you would, please. Thank you. So join with me, if you would, these words. Great Spirit, I am so grateful that you dwell in us and we dwell in you. I am so grateful that you are our birthright and that we are your expression. And I speak my word to all of the Harry Potters in attendance today, that I see the owls above us as they deliver the envelopes of our journey. And I know that for each and every one of us, the glory that lies behind the brick wall, which is an illusion, will take us far into our journey, because we are the expression of infinite potentiality. I am so grateful for this promise. So grateful for the words of wisdom that have come down to us through the ages. And in my gratitude for this, I let my word go, knowing that it's so, and so it is. Namaste.